Hello there, welcome to Heart Explained Therapy, and I need to get down this feeling or thought that I've had about something very deep, very difficult to understand, but it's something that I cannot find anybody else who agrees with this information. So it might be complete codswallop, or it could be something very important. But let me just break it down to you. There's a theory that I have that I can't find out there, and this theory is that everything deep down at the core is related to love. You could say an egoic state of self-love for you, that you can only ever really love yourself, that you can only ever try to be significant and feel significant and feel comfortable and as much as you want to avoid everything that's uncomfortable, you're accidentally subconsciously drawn to it. But I want to go a little bit deeper than that today. There's a spiritual and a religious and a scientific now knowledge that this love is a real thing, that you take lots of psychedelics, you see that you're connected to the universe, you're connected with everybody. This is just oneness, you are just one being as the universe in this sort of organic process, whatever it is, and that you express love through this. Somehow it's just what it is. Now, I disagree, and I've disagreed with this from the start when I first heard this, because for me it didn't sound good enough, and everything I heard, how they explained it, didn't to me make any sense. And now for the first time I think I can articulate something very difficult and break it down to show you exactly what it is. Now, it doesn't give you any firm answers, it's just a theory, but it also highlights something that's also quite important, and it doesn't discount the love and the bliss. I know that exists, but the way that these spiritual people and these gurus break it down is that you was born just pure loving bliss, a spiritual, organic, biological process of the matter, which is eternal, and that's it, and that's you, and you never die because you didn't exist, and you was an illusion. And you have to wake up and know your illusion, but not get connected to the new illusion that you've woke up from, because then you'll still be the original illusion or a byproduct of the illusion. But not to get too complicated, you as this loving, blissful spirit, and this makes sense. 0 to 3 years old, you're very happy. Apart from you crying for food, you are a pretty happy, innocent child, and your innocence can stay up till 10, 15. It's hard to take away that child's free, loving, playing, innocent being. But over time, poor education, poor adults, everything sort of hurting you, you build up an egoic state of mind, and your spirit dies and your dreams die, and you was never told what you are, so it's not even like you forgot what you are, you was never told what you was. And the spiritual gurus will say that there's a process to get this back in your adult life and be this innocent child once again, grown up, in maturity, feeling love and bliss. And you can take psychedelics and you can go there in 10 seconds, and you can have any sort of enhanced mushroom drug sort of type reaction and see this same thing. It's been proven in science, it's been proven spirituality. Loving and bliss seems to be the core function of life. Now I've got a couple of arguments, but this one's the first one that I have to break down. One of my arguments, I'll tell you that both of them. One of my arguments is we perceive life through human experience. No matter how far back you want to go and get deep with spirituality, it will still forever be a human perception. It's not like the spiritual gurus became pre-gods or after gods. I mean, they can be as intellectual and clever as they want, and they have been in the past. Brilliant. They've gone into their own minds and they've come out with the greatest knowledge ever, no denying it. And they found a truth that there does seem to be a substance like love that flows, but it's for a human being. Now that's important. Their argument is that we are also the nature and the universe, and we are all at one. And that's where the oneness comes from. We have to be, because we're all part of that process. But remember, we evolved. We evolved from biochemistry into organic matter and then into the evolution of now. And although we are expanding at a fast rate, you've got to understand that we're only viewing with the mind that we've got the capability to view something with. So the way that I break this down is there was always gravity, but we needed a human mind to perceive the mathematics of the equation to label it gravity. And then gravity appeared. Isaac Newton discovered gravity. He didn't create it. He created the language we put onto that. Now remember, we're putting the language of love onto this. And this doesn't have to be uncomfortable, by the way. To do away with this love is real. You do feel a place of love when you have psychedelics, when you have an ego-death experience. And beyond the ego-death experience, remember, the ego doesn't technically exist, so you actually don't ever have an ego-death because nothing's real. And this will feel like oneness. But my second argument, take the egoic mind and everything you've done to get down to this route, not just learnt about your past, how hard you had, everything, all your traumas, not just that one level of awareness. Let's go down a further level of awareness. Let's go to understanding how all your belief systems are not needed. They're technically wrong and they just hold you back. And then we can go into fears and we can break all them down. And then once you start breaking down fears, you start to understand love and self-love. And you realise self-love is more important than loving other people. But when you do self-love, you actually technically can love other people even more, because you understand they are part of you. And you can be connected through nature, and you can see the stars as a great place to be, standing under them, because it's gratitude. You're grateful for this. You are willing to worship any god, and you kind of feel like a god. So it's all great, and you got to a really far awareness now. And your ego is struggling to latch on to everything that I've just said. It's finally going. And the moment you think it's gone, it's love. So with everything gone, every little bit of mind matter, every little organism that you used to latch onto and call a system and a theory, once it's all gone, it's love. I don't believe that's right, because it contradicts everything that you just said. That's exactly what the ego does. The ego mind has to force you to attach to something. You see, it wouldn't be love. Now, I also have this argument, and spiritual people have said this, it's in the ancient scriptures. The Asian, from Asian, Indian to South American, they have all said the same thing. They're not really technically talking about an emotion of love. Now, this is quite crucial. So they argue that it's a different state altogether. It's all that madness gone. That sort of includes the love that you feel and the hate that you feel, because remember, it's all the same. It's all one. And we call it a different state. So now there could be more truth, because you're saying it's not related to a human being, it's different, it's separate. Don't you think that's exactly what an ego would do? For you to cling on? I mean, an ego doesn't want to die. And an ego that dies in you, you technically wouldn't function. You would seem insane to everybody around you. If you lost the ego, you would close down. You would meditate all day, every day, because you wouldn't need anything. You wouldn't need all these desires and attachments. And this is what people have done in the past. And they've come back with this story of bliss. For me, it's not true. It's exactly what the mind does. No matter how deep you go, the mind has to attach onto something with morals, with values. Now, this doesn't have to be uncomfortable, even though this is sort of shattering to the religious and spiritual believers in love. It doesn't have to be shattering. I admit that this place of bliss exists and the experience is great. But a great philosopher said that what we seem to do is have bundles of perceptions. We have continuous perception after perception. And you know that you do this every day. You perceive stuff before it's happened. It's the way that we function. So it seems to be a great explanation of what we do. Now, I think that some spiritual people get that intellectual with their mind and feel that they've gone that deep into their own mind or into their own knowledge and intelligence that they think they've come out with something different. And this is, at the moment, it seems to be love. Love and oneness, and we have to share this around the world, because we will be this higher intellectual loving person. I understand all that, but it's a bundle of perceptions from a man. Remember, man evolved from life. We label what is life as if we are the only thing that exists, but we're not. There's organisms, and there's even an organism out there that doesn't need oxygen or has no apparatus for oxygen, and there's multiple universes. And I think that we say we know something based on this is where we're at. It's just a perception, and I'm well aware that this is just a perception, but this is a perception that even the greatest minds do not look back and say, well, I've just said the egoic mind literally makes you cling on to something, and I've stepped out of it for 1 minute and I've come back and said it's love. Do you see how contradictory that is? And I'm not denying that that's something they've seen there, but it doesn't explain that the law of the universe is governed by love. I mean, let's just pretend that it's emerged to love at this point through humanity. Do you think a human being, for the good of any other being to survive, nature, animals, sea creatures, aliens, do you think humanity could ever love themselves enough to kill themselves for this other being to live more than us? Do you see how the ego can paint the picture that it's love and bliss? But there's more from the ego in that philosophy than the spirit. You see, the spirit, to me, is actually constant. It's constant and eternal. It doesn't actually need you to separate from the ego or be attached to the ego for it to be surviving. You see, it's a self-sustained system regardless of the vessel. I wouldn't say that was love. Now, you could argue that you could pick another word, another language for this, and you could pick, let's say, creativity. And that, to me, suits more than the word love. I mean, I know love to be pain, and beyond the egoic state, I know it to be a state of being through a perception. For me, creativity is a rebirth and death. It is something that can have a rebirth and death at a constant variation. It means it doesn't experience life and death. We experience life and death. The actual mode of the spirit is just constant. It wouldn't know if you was happy or sad. You don't have a spirit screaming to get outside of you. It's actually more subtle than that. If anything, you have the ego demanding it comes out of you. And there's no one in the world that's saying that an ego can be a god. But it has every right to be a god. It has every right to stand out and fight for its cause. And regardless how bad it is, and at the moment in this current state of affairs, I would say it was technically winning, and we're feeding the wrong god, if you like. And then we go to this word God. We seem to use this word so easily, and I don't think God means a religious character anymore. I think it means more of an energy, a being, the initial sort of power plug, if you like. And we've got to be very careful with this, because I was under the impression that if we had been created, then we are really still godlike. And then you realise that believing too much that you're godlike can make you do a lot and not do anything at all. It can make you live a very sort of meaningless existence. And the human that you're inside, if you can put it like that, sounds very strange, but what you find then is that human doesn't like meaningless projects. They're not built up for that. They're built up as a process to go forward. And the very thing, the very variable, the spirit, the constant, is also a process, just moving, trying to create. And this creation, this aspect, actually is also trying to come out of you. So it all just feeds back into this lovely unfolding craziness that nobody ever steps into, because it's too uncomfortable. It's too uncomfortable to go into that insanity. But for me, the egoic breakdown of the mind to turn around and say it's love, that's how it feels, isn't to me truly sticking up for your first theory of what the egoic mind does. It actually, to come out with the very thing that the egoic mind actually does, which is hang on to a system, to a policy, to a procedure. I've got this, I found this, and this is the answer. We've got to put it everywhere in the world. It's like, hold on, to me, that's egoic mind, and it's nonsense. Now maybe we don't know anything beyond this to say. The conscious mind can't be that logical, rational, when we are in such a early part of evolution. And going back to the Isaac Newton philosophy with gravity, there are things around us, features that we don't know exist, but we will discover them years to come. They've always been there, and I think telepathic minds will possibly come out in the future. The fact that we can be psychic, we can be interactive with people, we might even discover how ghosts actually could be a viable, real substance. It could be this spirit, this constant floating particles that we can't measure, we can't see, but the invisible stuff is still has some sort of coding, who knows. But I think that we have to understand that anything our mind says at this moment will always be a theory, and we're not seeing it as a theory, we're seeing it as a scripture, as religion. And I just think that's very dangerous, because even if you plug the whole world into this love and bliss, there would be no state of anything else for this place to emerge from. There wouldn't be any opposite for you to feel this. And then when you get drawn into that rabbit hole, you will see that it points quite clearly to simulation theory. Now, I'm not one who will state we're in a simulation, because again, you sound somewhat mad to believe simulation theory. But the reason why it seems to just end up there when you progress forward is because simulation theory is everything we are. Everything we are is a process, moving and expanding forward, trying to be self-sustainable, and also lots of rabbit holes that seem to be going into mazes and labyrinths and always coming back within ourselves. Isn't that a great simulation programming disk? Isn't that the place that you want a human mind? Or I would argue even deeper than that, isn't that the container that you would like to store consciousness in? And it could be no bigger than a microchip or a universe or multiverses. Deep, but I think it's important to go deep and break down these belief systems. And if you didn't understand any of this, find out about it, watch this over and over again, because mentally it just expands your mind. It's really good for you.